Welcome, Notary Social. Seller impersonation fraud threatens American homeownership. This article comes to us from Housing Wire. Unfortunately, today's competitive market has created the perfect environment for seller impersonation fraud, a type of fraud in which bad actors impersonate property owners and attempt to sell property they don't own. It is critical that title professionals and our industry partners spread awareness about this type of fraud and educate buyers about the steps they should take to protect themselves. The U.S. Secret Service reported a steep rise in seller impersonation in an advisory that it issued this year. According to a recent survey, 73% of real estate firms reported an increase in seller impersonation attempts this year. However, with increased vigilance by real estate professionals and buyer education, these scams can be spotted and we can reverse this trend. We as notaries can help reverse this trend as well. Many of us are homeowners and should be aware of this, and the best way to avoid being the victim of a seller impersonation fraud is to understand the threat and how it can happen. Professionals and consumers should be aware of the type of properties and transactions that are the most vulnerable to this type of fraud. Now, how does this fraud work? Scammers will search public records to identify real estate that is free of a mortgage or other liens. These often include vacant lots and or rental properties. The identity of the landowner is also obtained through these public record searches. If you own your property free and clear, you might want to think about taking out a mortgage even with a family member, so that is recorded with the property records so that it makes it much harder for these fraudsters to sell your property. So here's what happens. Scammers pose as property owners and contact a real estate agent to list the property for sale. All communications are through email and other electronic means and not in person. The listing price of the property is typically set below the current market value to generate immediate interest in the property. When an offer comes in, the scammer quickly accepts it with a preference for cash sales. And then the title company or closing attorney transfers the closing proceeds to the scammer. The fraud is typically not discovered until the time of recording or transferring documents with the applicable county. So you could have someone that's in another state, they have vacant land, and then they don't even know that their property has been sold until they go to try to do something with it. Now, there is hope for the future. Fortunately, there are some precautions that title and settlement companies can take to help prevent this fraud. First, they should contact the seller directly at an independently discovered and validated phone number. Title professionals can also ask the real estate agent if they have personal or verified knowledge of the seller's identity. There are several ways title professionals can verify a seller's identity. This can be achieved by sending the seller a link to go through identity verification using a third-party service provider, running the seller's email and phone number through a verification program, or asking conversational questions to ascertain the seller's knowledge of property information not readily available in public records. Now, how does this apply to us as notaries? Well, a lot of us are RONs and we will get seller transactions, and it is very, very, very important that we do follow our state guidelines. For me, the Texas Secretary of State, which is the seller must go through KBA, knowledge-based authentication, where they answer the 5 questions generated from their Social Security and credit history. And then the other thing is credential analysis, whereby their ID goes through a process and is checked through an outside party. We as notaries then should do an additional check. When we see their ID pulled up, it is very, very important that we stop, take a look at the person, take a look at their names, that everything matches. And I think sometimes as notaries, especially if you're a new RON, you're hesitant, you're nervous, and you kind of skip through the ID process, and that should never be done because we are here to prevent fraud. So make extra sure that you are taking a look at that ID scrutinizing it. You're making sure that that person does indeed look like that person. Check to see if the name has a junior or a senior, because that also has a lot to do with fraud. Sometimes a son or daughter could try to be taking the property without the elder knowing about it. And that's something I'm going to be talking about in the future, is elder fraud, which is very, very rampant at this time. So once you have looked at the ID and you can confirm that it is them, they've went through KBA and credential analysis, the next thing you want to do as a RON notary, online notary, is have them hold up that ID card, because what if they are just using something that was a copy and you want to just confirm that they indeed have possession of that ID card? Have them hold it up to the camera, look at it, and you can validate and see that it's a real ID. You can have them go back and forth on it so that you can see the hologram on there. Now the article goes on to say that title professionals can also compare the seller's signature to previously recorded documents to ensure they are the same. Now this sounds familiar for notaries as well. So they can also compare the sales price to the appraisal, historical sales price, or tax appraisal value to ensure that nothing seems out of the ordinary. Now typically as RONs, we do not actually see them sign the document because they're using an electronic signature, and a lot of times the platform will allow them to just type their name, and therefore using an electronic signature. The way that we can kind of compare is only in person, when we see them actually write that signature out. Are they nervous? Are they taking an extra long time to sign? Does it look like it's not a natural signature? That's something that we can be aware of. And remote online notarization is getting more popular, as this article references it. It says, if remote online notarization is available for the transaction, it can be used to ensure that there is multi-factor authentication of the seller by a title company's approved and vetted notary. I think this is very relevant in today's times, where we are doing so many remote online notarizations. Now, I did a video on this for notaries before. If you really, really want to be one of those vetted notaries, you should go to Secure Insight, and they put you through some rigorous testings, and lenders are going to be using notaries that are vetted from this. In that video, it was regarding the Doc Magic and Secure Insight, and I do put a promo code on there to get $429 off so that you can get on this notary database for lenders as vetted notaries. So I will put a link to that video so that you can go and check that out. Now the article goes on to say that of course the easiest way for buyers to protect themselves is by purchasing a homeowner's policy of title insurance, which often has additional fraud protection. We also recommend that all current property owners sign up for free property monitoring services that are usually offered by their county recorder's offices, so they can be alerted of any suspected fraud before it's too late. Now I will say there are some county recorder's offices that are really making some extra things happen, but in some cases it's just as easy as someone coming in there and turning in a deed. So we have to be extra vigilant and protect ourselves as homeowners and protect our clients. If you or someone you know believes that you may have been a victim of seller impersonation fraud, we recommend filing a fraud report with local and state law enforcement and the FBI at ic3.gov. As an industry that prides itself on protecting homeowners and their greatest investments, we can take these threats to prospective homebuyers and homeowners seriously. We take these threats to prospective homebuyers and homeowners seriously. That is why we have taken steps to spread awareness about seller impersonation fraud and educate homebuyers about how they can protect themselves. We encourage our industry partners to continue sharing best practices and tips to prevent more of these scams from taking place. And then finally, it says that ALTA encourages all stakeholders involved in the transaction to become educated about this fraud. And ALTA stands for American Land Title Association. I think that we as notaries play a very important role in preventing fraud. And I think we need to be more actively involved in seeing the different type of schemes that are going on and being aware so that we can help. So if you have found this interesting, I would love it if you would comment if you know someone that has maybe been a victim of this, or if you as a notary have come across anything like this. That would be really helpful if you would comment. And then also if you like and subscribe, that would be great. And I'm going to be bringing you some more articles. One thing that I would just love is if you have seen an article that is pertinent to our industry or has to do with fraud or elder fraud. I would love it if you would send it to me. I will do a podcast and YouTube video on it. All right, Notary Socials, stay tuned for many more to come.